Welcome to Refugee Radio.
This is the Refugee Radio Show on Radio Reverb 97.2 FM. In our programme, we talk to refugees and asylum seekers about their lives in order to ensure that their voices are heard and in the hope that the host population in their new communities can come to know them as individual human beings rather than just as stereotypes or statistics. In the show today, we have an interview by Alex Evangelou with the Iranian author Nasrin Parvaz. Nasrin was born in Tehran, where she became a women's and civil rights activist, which led her into conflict with the new regime. Nasrin was arrested, tortured, and sentenced to death. She eventually escaped from her situation and fled the country as a refugee. Nasrin wrote about her experiences in prison in her memoir, One Woman's Struggle in Iran. It was first published in Farsi in 2002. A summary of her memoir was published by the Feminist Review in 2003, and it was published in Italian in 2006. She has also published another work entitled Temptation, which is based on the true stories of the men who survived the massacre of Iranian prisoners in 1988. Nasrin has given talks on human rights violations around the world in Canada, Sweden, the UK, and Italy. She's spoken at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, the Ledbury Poetry Festival and Eloquent Protest, and for organisations such as Amnesty International and the Medical Foundation, also known as Freedom from Torture. Nasrin won the Women's World Award in 2003, was longlisted for the Bristol Short Story Prize and shortlisted for the Asham Award. Her prison memoir, One Woman's Struggle in Iran, is published by the Victorina Press and is available from Amazon and Waterstones.
Nasrin Parvaz, and I'm 64 years old. I was born in Iran, in Tehran. I grew up in eastern part of Tehran, and it was a poor area at the time. We didn't have any facilities for children in our neighborhood. So children played in the street. Girls and boys could play together then, but now it's forbidden. And it's forbidden in public. And girls have to cover their hair. It's terrible. My other memories. Women were free to choose what they wanted to wear. There was no dress code. Men and women could go out without facing any harassment by the so-called moral police, that the Islamic regime established. However, I'm talking about Tehran and a few big towns. Otherwise, women were subjugated in small towns. There wasn't any political freedom, but there was personal freedom during Shah. When people toppled the Shah, the regime was trying to take away all this freedom, and people were resisting. For the meantime, to say, I didn't mean to wear this or that, Anyway, later on, they put lots of pressure on women, and despite our fights, we had to we had to wear a scarf. But now, the young generation, women, young women, they remove their, they're removing their scarf in the street, and some of them are in prison. Some of the regime's agents, they attacked women, they splashed acid on women's faces. They hit women with different things,
When did you come in contact with the regime and their, foot soldiers in a personal way?
When they started to arrest, the situation became very difficult. Some of my friends were arrested and were executed. So in early 1982, I had to leave my job because every time I was coming to Tehran, I was interrogated. They would come up to the buses or even and ask people to come out. Not everyone. They choose people. Even they would stop taxis and, for example, pick you ask you to come out of the taxi and would interrogate you in the street, asking you, where are you going? Where are you come from? Lots of questions. Once I remember I was in a taxi. They stopped the taxi. And I knew they might ask the passenger. And so I hid the thing I had with me in the taxi. And they asked me to go out. These were Islamic guards. And they interrogated me in the street. They searched me, my bag, and when they asked me to go out, they asked the taxi driver to go. And I thought they're going. I thought that the taxi driver will go because there were other passengers. And I was very worried they might arrest me. And even if they don't arrest me, how can I go home now? And anyway, it took half an hour. They interrogated me in the street. And during that half an hour, the taxi driver and the passengers stayed. And when the Islamic guard finished, I didn't know the taxi driver is there. I was looking around what to do. I was very worried. And I suddenly saw the taxi driver waving his hand, telling me, come here. And he drove towards me. And I couldn't thank them enough, It was, it was very moving. Things like that. But anyway, I had to leave my work because it was dangerous to cross these borders they had made. And one day when I went to see a friend, he was arrested already and he was tortured, and he gave our meeting point to his interrogator.
This is the Refugee Radio Show on Radio Reverb 97.2 FM. You're listening to an interview recorded by Alex Evangelou with the Iranian author and memoirist Nasrin Parvaz. This is an edited extract of the full interview, which covers her whole life story and can be found on the Refugee Radio website. Nasrin Parvaz was arrested in 1982 for her political activism around women's rights and the trade union movement in Tehran. She was detained by the Revolutionary Guard, a notorious branch of the Iranian armed forces who police internal security for any deviance from their political views. Her charges brought with them the sentence of death.
So, where were you arrested?
In the street.
And after you were arrested, where were you? Did they take you to the police station? Yeah.
No, not police station. I was taken to Joint Committee Interrogation Center, which was in the hands of Islamic Guards Corps. They used bastinado, which involves hitting the sole of the feet. And they beat me until I was paralyzed. And it wasn't all. They gave me 2 times, they gave me electric shocks here behind my neck, my head, to force me to accept the confession, which I didn't. And in some point, they bashed my head to the wall, which caused a tumor to grow and made me epileptic. And the tumor was extracted in 2012.
So in the Joint Committee Interrogation Center, was there a process of that you went through, or was it how long were you in there?
6 months. And while I was there for 6 months, my parents were going to different prisons, asking if I was there. And they were told that I'm not there.
When did you get in contact with your parents again?
6 months after I was arrested.
Were there other prisoners around at that point? The
Joint Committee Interrogation was full. There were so many prisoners that they used the corridor. Actually, I have a painting about that. I was in the corridor for a month with blindfold. Imagine 24 hours a day. We had to be with blindfold because they didn't want us to see each other and to see the prisoners who were taken from their cell to the bathroom. So yeah, it was full. And some prisoners died under torture. Some prisoners committed suicide after being under torture for so long, that they couldn't take it anymore. So they committed suicide, and some of them were saved and put under torture again.
In the corridor, were you able to communicate in any form with other prisoners?
We were not allowed. And the first, but prisoners used to talk a bit, during, for example, the night or something like that. But I remember the first week of my arrest, because of the beating, I was so tired, or I don't know, that I was asleep day and night. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I woke up, sometimes, and I heard something, some prisoners whispered something to each other, and then I went back to sleep. I mean, it was, I don't know, it was unbelievable. Yeah.
And within the prison, what were the guards like? Can you tell me about the guards?
They were doing their job, which was, they were harsh, They, I don't know about now, but then they were very, how do you put it? They believed in the regime, and because the regime was saying it's a state of God, and they believed it, they loved Khomeini, and some of them would die for him. So yeah, they hated us because they believed the regime, they hated us.
Were any of your friends in prison at this time, or with you? Did you recognize anyone in prison?
Yes, I didn't recognize her, because I was still, she was at the beginning of the wing, and I was exactly at the end of the wing. And I was very tired, sleeping all the time. And one day, someone kicked my foot, and I was woken up, and it was painful. And it was another prisoner. She didn't know that I was in pain, and she was waiting for the bathroom, and she asked me, who brought you, who gave in your information, brought you here, and she told me that Raz is in the corridor. And I said, oh, Raz is arrested. I didn't know. And she told me she was arrested a day before me. And yeah, but then later on, I heard that some other friends were arrested. Yeah.
So what did they officially charge you with?
Not believing in God, spying for Western governments, and fight against the state of God.
And did these charges inform the type of treatment you got in prison and the type of punishments that you received?
Yes, people with these charges were sentenced to execution, and I was, but my father could change it. My family could change it.
So when you got into contact with your parents 6 months after you were arrested, how did you feel at that time when you first talked to them after being arrested?
It was very emotional, and my father asked me, "Did they beat you?" And before I answer, I wouldn't tell him that they did, because I knew him and my family would be very upset. I wouldn't tell him yes they did, but before I say anything, the phone was cut off, and a guard came and said, "Just talk about yourself." So my father understood that he cannot ask such questions. And I told him, "Don't worry, I'm okay." And but I had to prepare them that I'm going to be executed. And I told them. And my father was, he was shocked, and he said, "I'm not dead yet," so things like that. But that made him to go and go from one office to another office, from this,
And when did you find out that you were sentenced to execution?
I knew because my friends were executed, and then I was transferred to Evi, which we were going to have our court. Just 1 or 2 minutes. The court just took 1 or 2 minutes, and the judge asked me just a few questions, and the final question was, "Would you confess to wrongdoing, and would you say you're Muslim," things like that. I said no. And he said, "Okay, go." And I knew then that the sentence will be execution. And
how did you manage to endure knowing that you had execution sentence?
I wasn't the only one, and we all die one day. And I didn't want to do something that I regret later. So I tried to live my life in prison. Can I say something? It wasn't only that time that I was waiting for execution, for my execution. Later on, a few years later, in 1988, thousands of prisoners were executed. They first stopped our visit with our family, and then we heard that they have started to kill men prisoners. Then one day, they started to interrogate us, the women prisoners. And one day they took more than 50 prisoners from the wing I was in, and they never could come back. Later on, we heard they all were executed.
Why did they pick those specific prisoners?
Because they were with Mujahideen. I mean, they were arrested because of being, I mean, their charges was related to Mujahideen. Do you know Mujahideen?
Yeah.
Muslim organization. But at that time, I know that some of the people, I mean, women they killed, and these women were not with Mujahideen. They didn't believe in Mujahideen, and even their interrogators knew that they were not with Mujahideen. For example, Sarah, which was my friend, she was arrested with the accusation of being with Mujahideen, but she was changed in prison. She wasn't with Mujahideen at all anymore. She didn't pray. She was with us, and her interrogator knew that. Still, she was executed.
Why did the regime accelerate these executions in 1988?
You know, I remember that one of the events, what do you call it? Sorry, sometimes I forget the word. The one who runs the prison, the chief, what do you call it?
Warden?
Yeah, one of the Evans warden. His name was Lajavardi. I remember a few times. I mean, I was taken by force to the assembly hall, and otherwise I wouldn't go. I mean, and Lajavardi said that we are not stupid to let you go. During Shah times, there were a handful political prisoners. And he was stupid, let them to leave, to get released and make lots of parties. We are not stupid to let you go. And there were thousands of prisoners, you know. They didn't want anything happens and these thousands of people go outside and they could revolutionize Iran, you know. So they had planned to kill prisoners in advance. Then in 1988, when Mujahideen walked to Iran from Iraq, you know, with arms, things like that, the regime found an excuse beside killing them, killing those Mujahideen who marched towards Iran. Beside that, the regime started a massacre in prisons. For example, in Evin and Guardash, they first executed Mujahideen men. Then they started with the atheists, different groups of, leftists, and they gave them the choice. Would you repent your beliefs, your struggle, and start praying? If they accepted, they were saved. If they didn't, they were passed in a tunnel of beating with cable, things like that, and then going to be executed. So, so many of them didn't accept the condition to stay alive, and were tortured and executed.
And in 1988, were you involved in this new push of crackdowns in prisons? Did they interrogate you further?
Yes, we all. After you know, first they started with Mujahideen men. Then they finished with them, killed them all. They started with the leftist men. When they finished with them, you know, they started with Mujahideen women. When they finished with them, they started with us, but with us, it was just scaring us. We knew they had killed so many prisoners, we knew that. And the regime wanted us to know because they were asking us, we were interrogated as well. They were asking us if we would believe in God or things like that. The same questions they asked their, male leftists. And I remember a scene. We all were, they gathered all of us in a hall. And the prison warden who was someone else, it wasn't Lajrati anymore, took to us all, and he threatened us, gave us a choice, to accept the condition or not. And it was funny. He said, those who accept, stay here. Those who doesn't accept, leave, go to their wing. And we started to go to our wing. I looked back, only one person was standing there, only one person. So, but it was with us, it was only threatening us. At that time, they didn't kill the leftist women. I mean, before that, they killed so many leftist women. But at that, at that time, they didn't kill us, which we weren't many. We were under 200. And yeah.
So throughout your prison experience, was it hard seeing other people confess for like their crimes they hadn't necessarily committed?
I knew that it's a forced confession, and I knew that they wouldn't confess if, by free choice.
This is Radio Reverb 97.2 FM. You are listening to an excerpt from an interview recorded in 2022 by Alex Evangelou for Refugee Radio with the Iranian activist and writer Nasrin Parvaz. According to the Human Rights Watch World Report of 2021, Iranian authorities continued to repress their own people until now. The country's security and intelligence apparatus, in partnership with the judiciary, harshly cracked down on dissent, including through excessive and lethal force against protesters, and reported abuse and torture in detention. The country has the death penalty and executes hundreds of people every year, including those for vaguely defined national security crimes such as enmity against God and sowing corruption on earth. According to Amnesty International, prisoners are tortured to extract fake confessions, which are then broadcast on state television. Leaked surveillance footage from Tehran's Evin prison in August last year showed prison officials beating, sexually harassing and otherwise torturing or ill-treating prisoners. At least 24 prisoners died in suspicious circumstances involving allegations of torture or other ill treatment, including the denial of adequate medical care. The Iranian Penal Code still includes punishments such as flogging, blinding, amputation, crucifixion and stoning.
And at what point did you get released from prison? And when was that, and what was the conditions around that?
In 1990, a group from UN came to investigate Evin. And our parents told us to talk to them. But one morning when we went to pick up our teapot, we realized the regime had made a wall across the long corridor and hid us behind that wall. And the wall, they made the wall overnight, you know. Anyway, the regime showed the prison to the human rights group and hid us there, I mean, behind the wall. But, you know, it was after the massacre and our families were very scared that the regime would kill us too. At the same time, our families, and especially the families of those who were executed, talked to human rights organizations such as Amnesty, and the news of massacre came out. So the regime had to release us. So yeah, we were less than 200 from, imagine, all those 100,000 prisoners that were arrested at the beginning of 1980. In 1990, we were less than 200 who were released without confessing, without any condition. I mean, thousands were executed, and I don't know, perhaps 100,000 were forced to confess to get released. So we were less than 200 women only.
And after your release, what was the first thing that you did?
First thing, okay, my sister took me to a hairdresser. She touched my hair and said, "Ugh, what are you washing your hair with?" And my sister told her she just came out of prison. And the hairdresser was shocked. She was just shocked, and she said, "Oh, sorry." Yeah, it was one of the first things that I did.
Yeah. And after you were released, did you return to live with your family in Tehran?
Did I what?
Did you return to live with your family in Tehran?
Oh yes, they came to pick me up from prison, and yeah, actually it was the third time of human rights group to visit Devin, and my poor family had to wait all day because the prison warden, they didn't want the group, the human rights group, see us. So yeah, it was night when I was released.
So how had Iran changed since being in the prison and when you had released, how had the outside world transformed?
It was changed a lot. I remember once I was going somewhere and I stopped in a bus stop, waiting for bus to come. And actually, it was the first time I was taking, using bus. And the man who was standing beside me, before me, he said to me, he looked at me, and then he said to me, women's queue is there. He pointed at some place and said, women's queue is there. I looked at him. First, I couldn't believe what he was telling me. I said, what? I asked him, what are you talking about? He said, don't you know, men's queue and women's queue are separate, and women's queues are there. So I looked and I saw, yeah, two women were standing there. And I went and joined that queue. It was very upsetting, because then I was arrested. It wasn't like that. And then the buses were, men and women had separate section in the buses. Yeah. And many things were changed, but this can give you, whenever I was going out, the regime started following me. The regime's agents, very openly. It wasn't at the beginning. I don't know if they realized I'm active again, I don't know, but at some point they started to following me, and it was very difficult to escape. And so I had to be careful not to go to a friend's house who were not my friends from prison, because it was natural that my prison friends, we saw each other. It was normal, but with other people, I had to be very careful.
When did you realize that the regime was sending people to follow you?
I did some things like when I was passing a window shop, I stopped and looking at the goods. I used to try to see if that person who was following me in the other street is coming and pass me again, and what is he doing? And I realized, yeah, I was followed. But then a time came that when they realized I don't care anymore. They came to my face, showed me that they are following me. For example, once I wanted to make sure he was following me. I went to a shop. It was a grocery. And the man who was following me came to the shop, picked up a potato, a big potato, and asked me, is it good? I said, it's fine. And then I said to him, fuck off. Sorry, I shouldn't say this. It's recording. You can, I don't know if you can, I don't mind if it's there.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
And yeah, it was like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was going to ask how do how did how does the experience you went through in 1993 compared to let's say if you were to arrive in the UK nowadays? What's your opinion of the UK asylum process today?
It's very difficult, there are some asylum seekers are in detention centers. The UK doesn't want refugees. That's why they try to not let especially the boat refugees, asylum seekers, to enter the UK. They turn them round, pushing back them to the sea. Doesn't matter if they die, which thousands were died. And I wonder what's the difference between shooting people, hanging them, like what the Iranian government does. What's the difference with turning the boats, pushing them back to the sea and let them die, killing them? I mean, the UK government is responsible for thousands of deaths in Mediterranean Sea. I mean, yeah.
Are there any final remarks or messages that you would like to add that you would like people to hear, perhaps?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the Nationality and Borders Bill. The bill allows the government to set up new detention facilities outside of the UK, where people will be taken and locked up while their asylum claims are processed. This offshore policy, like the Australian model, will result in child and sexual abuse and a considerable cost to the public purse. And part of the problem is that gender isn't listed as a reason for persecution in the Refugee Convention. And I would like to ask why it isn't. While there are countries like Iran, where half the population, women, are living under sexual apartheid. One aspect of this law is that it wants asylum seekers to tell everything on their arrival. And if they add something later, the authorities won't accept. Women often don't talk about issues such as rape that they've suffered on their first interview or even last interview. I know Iranian women here who have their refugee status, who were raped in prison, but never talked about it in their asylum interviews. They were lucky that they came at the time that claiming refugee status wasn't as difficult as now. Shame, as well as what their family or their community might think, prevented them from revealing that aspect of what had happened to them in prison. So the bill punishes traumatized women who aren't able to share their whole story when they first come to the UK. Many women need mental health support, proper legal advice, and to feel safe before they can open up about the violence and abuse they have fled. So the bill would criminalize Ukrainians and other refugees for the way that they travel to safety. When your life is in danger, you don't think of your choices because you don't have choices except using any way to save your life or prolong it another day. That's why people try to cross the Mediterranean Sea. And as I said, the bill is against the Refugee Convention, and it's overall it's a racist bill. It will increase racism in our society, and we will have more attacks on refugees. Offshoring refugees is an explicit racial policy. I hope people show their objection to the bill and ask their MPs to stand with Ukrainian refugees and all of those in need of safety.
You have been listening to the Refugee Radio Show on Radio Reverb 97.2 FM. Today's programme featured Alex Evangelou in conversation with the Iranian author and memoirist Nasrin Parvaz. This is an edited extract of the full interview, which covers her whole life story and can be found on our website, along with many other interviews with refugees and asylum seekers at www.refugeeradio.org.uk. And if you want to find out more about Nasrin, you can visit her website, which is nasrinparvaz.org. Copies of her prison memoir entitled One Woman's Struggle in Iran are available at Amazon and from the publishers Victorina Press. My thanks to Alex Evangelou for all of his work on this programme, and to our friends at Exiled Writers Inc., and to you for listening. Don't touch that dial, as it were, and we'll see you next time.